managers on a Major League Baseball team don't make decisions. Credibility in this situation is worse than losing your job. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? The castration of the Major League Baseball managers, we know it. Ask me about my winner.
We've heard for years players in the NBA, whether it's star players, sometimes not even great players, asked to be traded or demand to be traded. And one of the normalizations in the NBA, as we've seen now, are players to hold out until the moment that they're traded. And we've seen it from big time players. James Harden, I'm not the greatest James Harden fan, but I acknowledge he's a great player and he's going to the Hall of Fame. Several other players in the NBA have waited, not played for their respective team until they're traded. And now I believe we've hit an all-time low. You have a role player, a good player, perhaps a glue type of player when it comes to certain teams, but all of a sudden he has taken his level or mental level to a higher game. And this is what kind of bothers me about the NBA. There's no reason that Jae Crowder should be sitting on the bench waiting for the Phoenix Suns to trade him. First of all, unless you're a good time NBA fan, that means you follow games day in and day out. You know the players, you follow the team through the playoffs. You may not have to be a diehard NBA fan, but you have to follow the NBA on a regular basis to know who the hell Jae Crowder is. And Jae Crowder's not making all-star teams. Jae Crowder is not winning championships for a given team. He is not going to be the reason that a team wins a championship this year. Hey, he might be on a team that is wins the championship. Robert Horry, what was that? 5, 6 NBA championships he was part of. You could say, hey, he had a couple big shots, but those teams might have been able to win without Robert Horry. And the same thing you could probably say about Jae Crowder if he happens to be on a team that wins the NBA championship this year. Two things I got with this. Number one, he's playing for the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are one of the best teams in the NBA. And you tell me that if you look at the Suns, you can't tell me that this is a team that you believe has a chance to win the NBA championship. So you're going to tell me that you have to go to another team, a team that maybe has more of a chance to win the NBA championship. First of all, I don't understand Crowder's take to even want to be out of Phoenix. Number one, that's the biggest thing. You're already on a good team. You're on a team that was in the NBA Finals a couple years ago. You're on a team that should compete this year to win an NBA championship this year in 2022, 2023, and for whatever reason, won out. And then the other element, which I touched on, and you kind of get the gist of where I'm going, you have to be an all-star. You have to be a top player in the NBA to have the audacity to be able to sit and not play until your team trades you. And we could talk about it all day, and you could say, oh, man, well, he's a veteran. He's been in the league for a while. He has played for some good teams. I get it. And you know what? I might even back off the point of knowing a little bit about who Jae Crowder is. He's not a complete nobody. So this shot that may be perceived that I'm throwing out here may say, hey, who the heck is Jae Crowder? Well, I say it for this reason. Because he is not an all-star. He is not a type of player that is going to turn a bad team into a good team. He's played well for Phoenix over the last couple of years. You've seen he's played for Cleveland, for Boston, for Miami. A lot of teams that have benefited from him being an important piece. But he's nowhere a number one. He's nowhere a number two or even a number three for any team. You can't find one NBA team that is going to take Jae Crowder in and say, hey, it's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 basketball players on my team. And why? Maybe I'm wasting a little bit too much time talking about this. My point is, who is Jae Crowder? Jae Crowder has not earned from his experience in the NBA enough clout to be able to, number one, ask for a trade, which, by the way, is in a league by itself. So I'm saying, in addition to the audacity to ask for a trade for a team that was in the NBA Finals a couple of years ago, you actually have the balls to say, I'm not going to play until you trade me. He's not Michael Jordan. He's not Wilt Chamberlain. He's not Larry Bird. He has not earned the right to be able to ask for a trade, let alone sit out until the team he happens to play for finds him a match. That's number one. The Portland Trailblazers. This is a team that really hasn't had distant NBA success since at least I remember in the 90s. And I think they've really turned the corner here. There was a lot of issue taken when it came to the hiring of Chauncey Billups as a head coach. And listen, there are different levels of things that should disqualify people in the hiring process. So I'm glad the Blazers did their job and their due diligence before they hired him. Anytime that there's any, sexual misconduct or harassment and stuff that has happened over a series, happened years ago, I think it should certainly be looked into. The Blazers coming off of, an 8-year run where they made the playoffs in consecutive years, made it to the conference finals, made it to the conference semifinals a couple of years ago. And one of the things that they've had is they've had their glue player. The player that, by the way, if Damian Lillard asked to be traded and decided not to play, that would certainly be acceptable. He's that type of player. He is the anti-Jae Crowder. Jae Crowder is the guy that, maybe is your sixth man, maybe cracks your starting lineup, but certainly has not earned enough clout to be able to sit and not play until he's traded. Damian Lillard is that type of player. Damian Lillard, over the last couple of years, has had that opportunity to move on and play for maybe a more competitive team. Maybe become a 1A with another star in another city and maybe increase the opportunity that he can win an NBA championship. You're looking at 8 straight seasons of the Blazers making the playoffs. 5 of those years only making it past the first round. Nate McMillan got the team 3 years in a row in there. And if you look back from really 82, 83, all the way to 2003, you're looking at an incredible run by the Portland Trailblazers and their team. Whether it's coaches Maurice Cheeks, Mike Dunleavy, PJ Carlissimo, Rick Adelman, Jack Ramsey. And look at it. From 82, 83, all the way until 2002, 2003, which is 21 consecutive years, the Portland Trailblazers made the playoffs. Unfortunately, they didn't win an NBA championship. They did win one under Ramsey in 76-77 with Bill Walton as their, let's say Damian Lillard right now. Obviously, we're talking about different players, but we're talking about star caliber number one player. And obviously, Bill Walton was that. Could have a conversation about Bill Walton being a Hall of Famer, and I'll take any argument with anybody that wants to say that Bill Walton isn't a Hall of Famer, because I think that's to me, it's crazy to think that people that have not seen or did not watch Bill Walton play cannot think of him as an absolute 100% unequivocal Hall of Famer, and he is. And thinking about the Blazers, because I really do want to hammer this point home, because we're looking at a wide open field when it comes to the NBA this year. Obviously, you got Boston, Milwaukee, Phoenix, Denver, Cleveland. Talk about teams like, let's say, New Orleans and Memphis, who you think are going to be good. Philadelphia is a lot of people's favorite in the Eastern Conference. Not a lot has been spoken about when it comes to the Portland Trailblazers. And Damian Lillard's not played a ton this year, but they're sitting here 11-8 right now. And they have some depth that they really haven't had in past years. I think Anthony Simons is going to be a legitimate 20-plus point scorer a game. I like the acquisition they made from Detroit to get Jeremy Grant. I think Josh Hart, who they got in the McCollum trade last year. And think about it. The trade of C.J. McCollum almost looked like it was kind of like a giving up in a way. Another kind of a number 2 player to Lillard, which McCollum was over the past couple of years. By the way, he's helping it out. The team that he ended up getting traded for too, New Orleans, they look like a much better team with them. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was a team that made a run deep into the playoffs this year. But I look at Portland and I just see it. I could see them getting to the NBA Finals this year. I see them right now or within the next couple months asserting themselves as a legitimate top 2 or 3 team in the entire sport. And I think part of it is, the thought of a healthy Lillard, but knowing that he's got help with Simons, with Grant, with Hart, Yusuf Nurkic. I think Shaden Sharp is going to help them out. I thought that was a solid pick for them. Guy who didn't play at Kentucky but went to school there. They took him in the first round, 7th overall pick. I really think they have some depth that they haven't had in past years. So you could mark it on this show that it's officially on the record. And when you see the emergence of the Portland Trailblazers, I think it'd be time to look at it and say, hey, once again, John was right. So George Halas, I think of him as the legendary coach, certainly a top 2 or 3 coach in the history of the NFL. And I like the fact that his name is out there a lot more. Bill Belichick within the next couple of years, as long as he chooses to continue to coach the New England Patriots, is probably going to pass, Halas for all-time wins when it comes to pro football. And Halas started his career as a head coach in 1920, coached all the way till 1967 with the Chicago Bears, and didn't coach during World War II. A lot of people didn't work during that time. And Halas really is a definition of what the NFL has been for the past 100 years. Imagine 1920. I mean, very few coaches really emerged themselves over the next series of years. Curly Lambeau comes to mind. You think later on, it wasn't until the likes of Paul Brown and Vince Lombardi, and of course, what we look at when we think of the greatness of Bill Belichick. But one of the things that stands out for George Halas was he was known to be a good judge of talent. One particular instance, he was wrong. And you're talking about one of the top players, and you have to say maybe top 100, top 50. I don't know how many players you're going to have to name in the NFL before George Blanda's name goes out there. I'm certainly not saying he's a top 20 or top 10, but he was a very efficient passer, but a very effective player for playing for 27 years. He played until his late 40s. He had the ability to kick in addition to go under center and run an offense. But George Halas didn't believe in him as a quarterback. George Halas didn't believe that he had the ability to run what was the Chicago Bears offense at that time. And he made a mistake. Blanda goes to the AFL. First 2 years of the American Football League, he leads the Houston Oilers to AFL Championships. The first 2 AFL champions are the Houston Oilers, and they would not be AFL champions if it wasn't for George Blanda. And George Blanda had a very good decade career, for the most part, in his 30s with the Houston Oilers. And George Blanda, a person that was respected very much for his judge of talent, somehow missed that. And I don't know how you miss that. I don't know how you miss a player that ends up being in the Hall of Fame. Now, was it ego? Was it one of those things that Blanda could do multiple things? He could kick the ball, and maybe he only looked at him as a kicker. Maybe he looked at George Blanda and took it to heart and said, hey, how can you be a quarterback in the National Football League and also kick? I don't know. It could have been something as mundane as that. But looking at the grand scheme of things, I look at George Halas and I think he's an all-time winner. I love the fact that he coached in 5 different decades from 1920 to 1967. He was the epitome of the Chicago Bears. And if you think of Chicago Bears football, you shouldn't think of anybody else, whether it's Gale Sayers or Walter Payton or Dick Butkus or Mike Singletary or Mike Ditka or whatever else you want to say. There is no Chicago football without George Halas. But I say all these years later, how do you miss out and how do you misjudge a solid quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback, and an AFL champion, could have been NFL champion quarterback in George Blanda? Now, Halas won 5 NFL championships himself. Like I said, is in no way being knocked off the pedestal that he is. You have a Mount Rushmore of all-time NFL head coaches. There's Belichick, there's Lombardi. Pretty hard to name anybody else that's not George Halas on there. Maybe Curly Lambeau is the 4th. If you're watching, you're listening, you're absorbing what it is that I'm saying. Do you have a better Mount Rushmore of pro football head coaches than that? Don Shula's got to be in the mix. How much do you squeeze him in there? Yeah, it's hard to name 3 others without having to include Halas. Special day in the world of sports, one of the biggest rivalries, if not the biggest rivalry, on the football field right now. And this is in all of sports, forget just football. It's hard to name a better rivalry than Michigan-Ohio State. You're talking about 2 schools that go back a long time, the rivalry amongst the fans, the attention that the game gets. And you've said before, hey, Ohio State or Michigan could go undefeated the whole rest of the season. They lose to their rival, then it's considered a lost season. There's very few rivalries in sports that you can even say that about. And you're also talking about the number 2 and number 3 teams in a respective country as we speak. So there is no other rivalry that exceeds that of Michigan-Ohio State. But I'm going to name a couple others that I believe in that are up there. Yankees-Red Sox. Probably hard to name another one in baseball. Another one is Giants-Dodgers, especially since they went from the New York rivals to the California rivals. Those 2 are certainly the strongest in baseball. I think of Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens when it comes to the NHL and hockey. 2 original 6 teams, 2 teams that for generations have hated each other. I think of North Carolina, Duke in college basketball. Football, there's a couple. I could think of the Philadelphia Eagles with either Dallas or Washington, but the Cowboy Washington Redskin football team / Commander rivalry, to me, exceeds any other one that I could think of in football. There's Pittsburgh, Cleveland, but remember there was a couple of years where Cleveland wasn't in the NFL. There's probably some other ones that you can name, but to me, Washington, Dallas is probably one of the stronger rivalries that you see in a National Football League. You could talk about Alabama, Auburn when it comes to college football. And I know there's a lot of Alabama and Auburn fans out there to say, you can't talk about rivalries and not talk about what that means when those teams get together. And they literally want to kill each other. That's the strongest rivalry that I could think of as far as just pure hatred. But I don't think it's up there on the level of Michigan and Ohio State. This is the Pass Ball Show brought to you by JohnPielli.com, by St. Aloysius Church in Jackson, New Jersey, by 2A's One Passion Food Truck located in Scranton, Pennsylvania. We'll try to be with you again next week for another edition of the Pass Ball Show. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.
My apartment smells of rich mahogany. Why don't you give it all or a majority of it to the team that wins the freaking World Series? I was going to listen to that, but then I just carried on living my life. And they come out as the biggest Major League Baseball manager apologist. That'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired. Because hitters are going out there saying, I'm either going to hit a home run or I'm going to strike out. And if I don't get a pitch that I feel like I could drive out of the park, I'm not even supposed to be here today. Especially prospect hoarders and hoarders are going to be a little pissed off at me when I say this. I'm a dude playing the dude disguised as another dude. There are only two managers in baseball's Hall of Fame who have losing records. One of them is the iconic Tommy Mack, who you could say, in spite of winning 5 World Series championships as a manager, could be in as much as a pioneer. And what side of the spectrum they're on? Were they pitching? Were they batting? If your favorite team was pitching and a ball got inside and hit a batter, there's no way they could have been on purpose. But if you were a fan of the team that was batting and the ball got inside and hit somebody or went behind somebody's head, absolutely 100%, unequivocally, that pitcher was throwing out. They put their tail between their legs and decided they're going to do exactly what they're told. You damn well right better give him a contract extension. You damn well right better make him the manager over the next series of years.
35 years ago, I could have loaned your parents the money for an abortion.